Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next installment of Around the Beat on BaltimoreBaseball.com with Dan Connolly. And my guest today is Jeff Fletcher of the Orange County Register. He covers the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Has been doing so for 4 seasons now. He's a longtime baseball writer. He covered the Bay teams, the A's and the Giants for 11 seasons, and he's probably one of the more informed baseball writers out there. If you're going to have an argument with Jeff, you got to make sure you have all of your facts ready before you come to him. So this should be a fun one. Welcome, Jeff. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So let's just start. And, I mean, in our business, Jeff, speculation runs everything. We know that. I mean, people love to read about, the NFL draft and who someone's going to pick or trade rumors or whatever. And one of the speculation rumors, whatever you want to call it, that's starting to gain some steam is Mike Trout leaving the Los Angeles Angels. And, from afar, you look at this and you think this guy turns 25 in August. He's been a number 1 or number 2 on the AL MVP voting each of his 4 full seasons. He's probably the guy you would build around in baseball. And there's talk that, maybe he goes to the Yankees, maybe he goes to the Cubs. I mean, you put Trout and trade rumors in Google, you'll find all kinds of stuff. Let's get somebody who actually is there and sees this and knows what's going on. What is your take on Mike Trout, and is it even a possibility that he could be dealt away from the Los Angeles Angels?
Well, first of all, I think that anything is possible. I would say that it's highly, highly unlikely. But I don't think the Angels, the Angels say absolutely not, we're not trading Mike Trout, but they have to say that. They can't possibly say anything else. If they even crack the door open a little bit, then it creates this big issue, this big thing that's like elephant in the middle of the room. So publicly, of course, they say absolutely not, we're not. But, when you think about it, they are a really troubled franchise right now because they're not very good at the major league level and their farm system is terrible. And you can't just rebuild your team through free agency. Even if you have the money to do it, you can't do it because you're only signing players. Free agents, by definition, are old. They're 29, 30, 31 years old, and you're going to pay for their worst years, i.e. Albert Pujols, who we'll talk about in a little bit. But so you think about it. If you want to rebuild the franchise, you got to get a lot of young players. You can either wait to draft them, but that takes a few years, or you can trade players like the Braves have done and get a whole ton of young players at once. The only way the Angels can really do that is by trading Mike Trout. So I think that they are going to listen over the winter. People are going to call and they'll say, what do you got? And if somebody can possibly make them a deal for 5 players, including a Noah Syndergaard type guy, at the middle of it, then, it's possible. But, I'm not sure any team is going to want to give up 5 players, including 2 franchise, 0 to 3 type players for Mike Trout. So if that's not going to happen, then they're probably not going to do it. But I do think that they have no choice but to listen just because of the situation they're in with the franchise.
It's funny. The Orioles basically rebuilt their team. They were in a very, very similar situation in 2008. And the trade that sent Eric Bedard to the Seattle Mariners for 5 players, which included Adam Jones and Chris Tillman, really was the beginning of laying that foundation. Obviously, they got some good draft picks, and they could get a Wieters and a Machado and guys like that. So obviously, it makes sense. But when I look at it from afar, Jeff, I think I'm not sure there's anybody in baseball I'd rather build my team around. And I mean, I understand that you might have some tough years in Anaheim if you go ahead and do that and wait for the farm system and wait for, finishing towards the bottom of the standings in a couple years. But I mean, this guy signed for 4 more full seasons and he's 25 years old. Like you said, you're getting the best of him right now. If you had to build a team around a player right now, would he be the guy? I mean, you see him every day. I don't. But would he be the guy, or would you lean to somebody else?
No, he'd definitely be the guy, and like you said, that's the biggest reason to not trade him. If he had 2 years left, then that's a whole different situation, because then you're saying, well, can we make a good enough team around him in 2 years? The answer is probably no. But he has 4 years left, so you could conceivably trade other people, wait for the draft, and rebuild, maybe for his last year of his contract, you're pretty good again, and then maybe you can re-sign him for his last 2 years. you can try to do that, but it's going to be frustrating in the meantime for Angels fans. They're going to love to watch Mike Trout, but they're not going to have a whole lot else around him just because it takes time to draft yourself back to having a good franchise. So, but like you said, he's young, so you can wait. You can take a little of that time and try to do it.
Let's stick with building around for one more second before we get into the actual Angels and who the Orioles are visiting this weekend, starting Friday in Anaheim, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's the beginning of a 3-city, 9-game, 10-day road trip for the Orioles. But when the Orioles get to Anaheim, you'll get the chance to see Manny Machado play, and he's obviously playing shortstop, something you haven't seen yet. When you look at Trout, I mean, obviously it's Trout and Harper. That's what people have been talking about for a while now, and the MVPs and everything else. But when you look at it, from afar, do you believe that Manny Machado is in that conversation now, or is he still a tick below Trout, and is Harper a tick below Trout?
Well, I think both those guys are in the conversation now as of 2016, but the issue is still, for those guys, they haven't had the consistency that Trout has had. Trout has basically, from the minute he set foot in the major leagues as an everyday player, he's been awesome. He hasn't had a bad year. He hasn't had really any kind of bad stretch. He's had a bad month or so, but he's never had a bad year. He's won the MVP and finished second in the other 3 years that he didn't win it. So it's pretty tough to compete with that. I think that, right now, if you're taking, from April 1st, 2016 to, through May 2016, where we are right now, those guys are just as good as Trout. And especially now that Machado is playing a middle of the diamond position, that really makes a difference. But, I think they still have to do it for a little longer before you can really put them on the same class as Trout.
Now with the Angels, 10 of the last 12 seasons they finished over 500, and we're kind of used to that consistency now. We're used to, Scioscia's got some magic, and they've got a lot of talent, and they have the money to spend. And when you look at this team right now, and you mentioned the minor league system being considered, the worst in baseball, at least by Baseball America and some others, you got to kind of wonder, at least from our angle way out here, how did this happen? I mean, this team won 98 games in 2014, and had the should have been or could have been the World Series team if they hadn't run into the Kansas City Royals the way the Orioles did. What's happened here? I mean, I know obviously the roster's gotten a little old and right now is exceptionally beat up. But what happened to this 98-win team just a year and a half ago?
Well, I think they've kind of gone a similar path to a team in your neck of the woods, the Phillies. As you look at what happened to the Phillies, they were good, and then they kind of hung on to things a little too long and stayed sort of middle of the road. And when you're middle of the road, you're not good, and you're also not getting draft picks. So then not getting high draft picks. So then it makes it tough, and things start to fall apart. And I think that's kind of, the Angels are not quite to that point yet, but they can sort of see it down the road a little bit. So they really need to try to do everything they can possibly do to win now, because the future just does not look great for them. It's just really pieced together with Band-Aids, and there's not very much depth in the organization. I mean, they don't have prospects that you can come up and say, well, this guy who's in Double-A is going to be a franchise player for us, or not even a franchise player. He's going to be an everyday player. You don't see that guy. They just don't exist. Their farm system is awful. So they really are just trying to piece it all together with short-term solutions and Band-Aids and half answers all around the diamond, besides really Mike Trout and Cole Calhoun and Garrett Richards, who's now going to be out for, probably this year and next year. So it just doesn't look very good. And the problem is, when all these other years that they were pretty good, they didn't get high draft picks. And and also they gave up a lot of draft picks when they signed free agents like Josh Hamilton and Albert Pujols. So not only do you lose the draft picks when you sign those guys, but you lose a lot of money that then you could use to improve yourself. They haven't really signed any free agents of any note since they signed Josh Hamilton. So, they're just not getting there's no influx coming from anywhere. They're not buying it. They're not drafting it. They're just kind of going with what they had, and that is melting away, basically.
And what is the sense in Los Angeles with that? Because, the Angels can kind of thumb their nose at the Dodgers, for the last few years, last decade or so. But now the Dodgers obviously have spent a lot of money and they look to be in a better position, and the Angels look like they're going down the elevator. Is there a sense there in LA that things are changing?
I think that the teams sort of operate pretty much independent of each other, and I don't think that there's a lot of compare and contrast going on.
Okay.
The Dodgers are in a whole different situation because they had an ownership group that wanted to just come in and just had no spending limits at all. They spent like a ton of money on everything, on international free agents and everything. They cranked their payroll up to be huge, and now they're even showing some signs because they've had a lot of guys get injured. They thought that they could outsmart the world and sign all these guys that had been injured and would suddenly stay healthy for them, like Brandon McCarthy and Brett Anderson. And guess what? They still got injured. So now they're having some issues too. But they have a great farm system, so they can fix some of their problems internally, either by promoting guys or by trading them, which is something the Angels can't really do. So that still puts the Dodgers ahead of the Angels in that sense.
Can you give us, obviously the rotation is suspect now, especially with the loss of Richards. Can you kind of give us a little update on what's going on with Garrett Richards? And you kind of mentioned that he could be lost this season and next. He wants to kind of avoid Tommy John, it looks like. What's the latest on that? What can you tell us from your point of view?
Well, essentially what happened is he tore his UCL, and they said he's most likely going to need Tommy John surgery. This was the very end of April, beginning of May. And he was pretty much resigned that he was going to have Tommy John surgery. But then as he went around and saw more doctors, I think he got to the idea that, first of all, Tommy John surgery, we used to think 12 months, 12 months you're back. But I think that that's sort of still the best case scenario. And when you look in reality, it still is more like 14 months, 15 months, 16 months sometimes. So I think when you look at it that way, you say, well, if I have Tommy John surgery today, I'm going to make it back for just the very end of next season. Right. So, what's the point of my putting myself through all this just to make 8 starts next year when I can potentially try something else? And if it works, I can pitch this year and all of next year. And if it doesn't work, then I have Tommy John surgery, and all I've cost myself is those 8 starts at the end of next season. So I think that is the way he's looking at it, and he's going to try. He got a stem cell injection the other day, and that worked with a few other players. Bartolo Colon had it. It took him a lot longer to rehab, but he was doing his shoulder and his elbow. Richards is going to give it a shot. I think he's going to wait 6 weeks, and then they're going to see. And if it hasn't worked in 6 weeks, at that point he's going to have Tommy John surgery, and at that point he's going to absolutely have eliminated next season also. But, like we said, he probably wasn't going to pitch a whole lot of next season even if he had the surgery today.
Is that kind of the death blow for this team because the rotation was kind of sketchy to begin with?
Well, there has been a lot of death blows for the rotation. They went to spring training. They had 8 guys when they got to spring training who had been major league starters, and to various degrees, some of them pretty good ones. And everybody said, oh, boy, they should trade some of that and, get some help for their lineup. And they didn't trade any of it. And since then, 4 of those starters have gotten hurt. And 2 of them, seriously, Garrett Richards and Andrew Heaney, who also may have Tommy John surgery. And then 2 of them, Tyler Skaggs, has basically missed about a month now, and he's still maybe another month away. And C.J. Wilson has barely even touched a baseball since the start of spring training. He's just now maybe going to start a rehab assignment in about a week. So that's half of those guys out major injuries. And then, one of the other ones, Matt Shoemaker, who was great in 2014, was runner-up for Rookie of the Year, has been pretty inconsistent to bad for last year and into this year. So they're really – and Jared Weaver is, throws the ball 83 miles an hour now. So he can be good sometimes just with his smoke and mirrors and guile and moxie and breaking stuff. He can have some good moments, but it's really hard for him to consistently go out there and give you like 4 good starts in a row. So their rotation is really troubled right now. They got Hector Santiago as their ace at this point, and he's a pretty good on most good teams would probably be like a number 4 starter. But he goes out there and he's at least consistent, and even when he has a bad game, he doesn't totally give it up, and he has some really good games. He just threw an 8-inning shutout 2-hit ball the other day in Seattle. He throws 95. He's lefty. He's pretty good, but they don't have really much else. So they got Julius Chassin. They picked him up from the Braves.
Right.
And he's just another kind of journeyman guy, although he pitched pretty well in his first game with the Angels. So they're hoping that he can just provide them innings. And they're on the verge of signing Tim Lincecum, which is the ultimate Hail Mary, because Lincecum hasn't been good in 5 years, basically. But it's kind of a no-risk proposition for the Angels. And if they get anything out of him, it's probably better than they would get out of just one of the guys from their farm system.
Now, obviously, when we think of the Los Angeles Angels, we think Mike Trout won, but we do think Albert Pujols too. And you know, the guy hit 40 home runs last year, so you have to think that there's still something left in the tank. But here's a guy who's 36 years old. He's got a contract for 5 more seasons, running through 2021. And I mean, I guess what kind of strikes me is that this guy has a OPS, not an OPS. On base plus slugging at 670 right now. And I mean, he's averaged 970 or so in his career, 300 points higher. Are we seeing the obvious and natural decline here of Albert Pujols?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, he's 36 years old, and we kind of got used to for a generation or so where guys were still good when they were 36 years old, but now these guys show up all the time and they make you pee in a cup. And people are suddenly, strangely, not as good when they're 36 years old. So I think that is what we're seeing with Albert Pujols. And, I mean, there's been a lot of things that have happened to him that are just natural things with age. He cannot run anymore. So he loses every infield hit that he ever got now. He's not going to get anymore. He's also, I think, as you lose a little bat speed, you become sort of a guess hitter and have to cheat a little bit, and that makes you just pull the ball. So, and nowadays, all of a sudden, teams are paying a lot more attention than they were 5 years ago to where you're hitting the ball. And he can hit the ball as hard as he wants, but there's 5 guys standing in one place where he hits the ball to. So they catch it. And then the other thing is he's not drawing the walks that he used to draw, which is kind of a 2-part thing. One is that people are just not pitching him around him as much. And the other is that he's just probably not taking the borderline pitches as much because he feels like he's got to do it now. The offense is relying on him. After him, there's nobody really hitting behind him. So he's not just going to take a walk and let the guy behind him do it. He's expanding his zone a little bit, trying to do it himself. And as a result, he's not taking the walks. He's swinging at some worse pitches, so he's making some weaker contact. And you add all that up together, and that is how you go from being what Albert Pujols was in 2010, 11, 12 to what Albert Pujols is today. Now, there's still some value to that because he still puts the ball in play, doesn't strike out, and he can still hit the ball over the fence. When, you make a mistake to him, he's still got enough power. He hit 40 homers last year. He's already got, I think, 8 this year. So he's going to end up hitting a lot of homers. He's not going to have a high average. He's not going to give you a whole lot else besides that. But, at this point, the Angels, if you tell them at the beginning of the year, Albert Pujols is going to hit 35 homers and bat 230, they'll say, okay, we'll take it.
What happens in 3 years, 5 years from now?
Boy, that's a good question. I mean, he's certainly not going to get any better at this point. And, I think they're just going to have to wear it. I mean, Pujols has said that if he feels like he can't be a good player, he would just retire, and the Angels would be off the hook for the money. I absolutely believe that if he feels like he can't be a good player, he would retire. I just do not believe that he would feel like he can't be a good player. Right. Because I think guys, by their nature of what gets them to this point, always feel like they can do it, and he's always going to feel like, it's right there, and he's going to feel like he's hitting the ball hard, even though the ball is right at somebody, and he's just going to still feel like he's got that in him, and he's going to keep trying and trying and trying all the way to the end of the contract. But I just can't see it. It's just going to be a huge albatross for the Angels. As he, 2 years from now, what is he going to be? Is he going to be hitting 210 with 18 homers, and you're going to be paying $35 million for that? It's just going to be a very difficult situation that they're facing with him.
Now, one last thing. We talked a little bit earlier about the farm system, and one of the things that I think from afar and watching the Angels is they were so good at just developing guys that no one really knew much about, or the Darren O'Days or whoever it might be. And one of the guys that they developed, they put him into the Rookie of the Year conversation several years ago, and really looked to be like a budding star for the Angels, was Mark Trumbo. And the Angels traded him away, and then the Diamondbacks traded him away to Seattle, and then Seattle traded him away to the Orioles. And now Trumbo has really been a breath of fresh air for the Orioles. I mean, he's he came in as supposedly a power guy, and he couldn't field. He's done okay. He's been adequate in the outfield, and and he's hitting the ball. He's batting about 300. He's hitting to all fields. He's hitting doubles. He's hitting singles. He's got 11 home runs. I mean, he's doing everything they ask and more at age 30. Now, you did cover Mark. What's your take on Trumbo? What's your take on Trumbo now? Does it seem like he's become a more disciplined player in his age, or do you think it's just one of those things he's hot for a month or two and it'll seek its level?
Well, I think it's great to see him having a great start, like you said, in Baltimore. I find it hard to believe that guy's changed too much at that age. I think he is what he is, and I think he was what he was when he was with the Angels. And the Angels saw that, and they said, this is great that we have this guy who's got a lot of power, but they said, well, he doesn't get on base a lot. He doesn't play defense that well. He's getting expensive. We had other hitters at the time. They'd gotten Josh Hamilton. Right. I think they were about to get Josh Hamilton. I'm trying to remember it. But anyway, they had lots of other guys that could hit. What they needed was pitching. So when they traded him, they got Hector Santiago for him, who has since started 65 games or something like that for them and been pretty good. And they got Tyler Skaggs, who they still think can be pretty good. He's already started about 15 games for them, and as soon as he comes back, he had Tommy John surgery. He's still only 24 years old, so they still feel like there's a lot left in his tank. So I don't think the Angels, no matter what Trumbo has done since then, would reverse that trade. And also, you look at the fact that in between the time they traded him and now, two other teams have already also kind of given up on him. So I think that there's definitely some holes in his game. I think he definitely does a lot of things. He hits home runs really well, and he could get on base, I guess, if he has figured that out. And if he has so far, then great. But you just wonder if a guy at that age is really going to suddenly start doing something that he hasn't really done a whole lot prior to that. So we'll see.
Okay, we're talking here with Jeff Fletcher of the Orange County Register, and I got one more question for you, and then we'll wrap it up. Just bottom line, the Angels are struggling right now. It doesn't look good from afar, but I mean, when the dust settles in September, where are the Los Angeles Angels?
Right now, I would say they're probably going to end up with about 70 to 75 wins, something like that. They looked like, on paper, the best case scenario for them with everybody they had was that they were maybe an 84-win team, something like that. And if you got some breaks and maybe somebody came up with a year that you weren't expecting, like a Tyler Skaggs, who had missed last year with Tommy John, if he would have come up and all of a sudden been like this 15-game winner, which is certainly possible, then that would have been the kind of thing that could have pushed them up to be, 88, 90-win contender type team. But before that, the best case scenario was still, like 84. And then you start to take all these guys out that got injured, and it's to no fault of anyone other than the baseball injury gods. There's just not enough tools there for them to really compete. I mean, maybe they'll prove me wrong, but I think that right now they're probably looking at 70 to 75 wins, and wherever that lands them in the division, which in this division they still possibly can finish like third with that, just because the A's look terrible and the Astros have been terrible, and who knows. But they're not going to be close to the playoffs as it looks right now.
Jeff, that is it's so surprising for me to hear that, especially considering how good they were just a couple years ago. But that's baseball. That's what happens. And, you got to continue to keep it going and feed it from the farm system and everywhere else. So very, very interesting discussion. Jeff Fletcher, Orange County Register. You can look at his stuff on Twitter at Jeff Fletcher OCR, or check out the Orange County Register. Jeff, so early in the morning for you here. I really do appreciate you coming on BaltimoreBaseball.com with me.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care, man. Thank you.
All right. See you.
Bye-bye.